What's up, Squadron? Aviation has given me a ton of amazing experiences. And more importantly, it's introduced me to a whole new family of friends. Join us tonight because we're cleared direct for some hangar flying. I'm Ryan Dembroski, and this is SuperAero Live.
I can hear you rubbing your hands together.
Hey, what's up, everybody? SuperAero Squadron, Av Geek, Nerds, Airplane, whatevers. It's Wednesday, 8:30 Central, 1:30 Zulu, and that can only mean one thing. It's time for SuperAero Live down here in... It's still the pandemic. Did you guys know that? It's still happening, and I've just never left. What you don't know is in between the shows, I never leave this chair. I'm actually, bolted to it. Anyway, that's how it feels. I hope you're well. I hope you're good. So many awesome friends in the chat. Gabriel's here. Speedbreak is here. Bob Smith is here. Mike's here. Ben, dude, so many awesome people. Marty, Zach Sherman. Zach, I saw you were in the chat like an hour before the stream started to let people know when it started. Thank you for doing that. We're gonna get to our guest tonight because I'm super pumped and slightly intimidated by him. But first, do me a favor, like, share, subscribe, and a big thanks to all the folks on Patreon that support this channel. Tangible thing with the support you've given me, I got a new table. It's not a card table anymore. It's like a real thing, and that's because of you guys. Anyway, all right, let's introduce our guest. I'm super pumped. Elliot's here, guys. You guys know him. Hey, Elliot.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
The man that needs no introduction. Excited to have you, and we're just gonna hangar fly for a little bit today. I think there's some people in here who know you or came over from your audience. There's a lot of people here who are excited to see you in the chat. And so, guys and gals, as we chat tonight, obviously if you have any questions, throw them in the chat, and maybe Elliot will answer them. We'll see. Or maybe I'll read them. We'll see. So
I just want to say real quick, this is super professional. You've done a fantastic job setting this up, and I feel really honored that you thought I was worthy of being on it. So lots of great work, and it's I feel pleasure to be a part of it. I
will send you the $50. It was $50 or $20. I'll send it to you in the mail for saying that. Thank you so much, buddy. So let's just. I wanted to say, I don't know if you remember, you and I met each other a couple years back. This is us at AirVenture 2017. Totally wow. Nerding out, yeah. And I was trying to pull my best. I don't know what we buy some sort of Piper Cub, Carbon Cub or something.
Perfect.
And I was trying to find them before the show tonight. You gave me a twerp patch. And I was super pumped about it, and I put it in. At the ad agency I worked at the time, I put it in my office. And for people, I wish I could have found it. It's in when you get laid off, you just throw everything in a box, and it's in that box over there somewhere. But
and those boxes just stack up as you go from career to career.
Right, exactly. What is my hair doing? Oh my god! All right, so this thing, it's so big, right? And I put it at this big time ad agency. All these art directors are coming by, and they're like, "Whoa, who designed that?" And I was like, "Hey, I know people who are cool. I'm cool. I'm relevant." So
those patches went quick, man. I don't. I have my single patch, but I don't know that I even have a backup. So it's cool that you got one.
Oh yeah, no, I feel it's please don't be offended that it's in the box for sure. And someday it's going to go on a jacket. And maybe we'll talk about that, where that patch came from a little bit later. But I wanted to dig in just for people who could maybe not possibly know who you are. You sent me a million pictures, and I went through and just pulled a couple for people. You have kind of the most amazing set of experiences that you've gone through, and you look always super. I can't swear on the channel, but a bad ace, man. You're I gotta come up with a better way. And everything from an ultralight program that you guys did to this. That's a thing that you did with your amazing wife, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
So like a little bit of breadth there in your experience, and then separately, like is like ultralight seaplanes. I mean, I don't know. Each of these photos could probably be like an hour-long conversation. Jets. You know what I like about your branding with the bright orange flight suit is that you always know where you are in the photo. And then stuff like this, like I don't know, you just seem like you have like literally the best aviation life. I think we're going to talk about this airplane a little bit later, but here's the thing. So in the and I hope maybe you're just going to sign off the stream right now. In the bucket of photos you sent me, there was this one. So back in the day,
man,
you were a real person. Before you were a superhuman test pilot, you were a real person riding a motorcycle. Is that your real hair?
Oh boy, I didn't think we were going to go this way.
Well, don't worry.
All right.
It's going to get better.
When I was in college, I was in engineering school, and engineering school is a lot of math, and it's a lot of theory, and it's a lot of sitting in class listening to a smart dude in a tie tell you stuff that seems like sometimes in another language. And to sort of balance that, I needed something else. So I swam competitively, and it's related to this photo. Just hang with me. And I worked at a motorcycle shop, a British motorcycle shop that was right by where my college was. So the bike that I'm sitting on is a 1968 Triumph Tiger. That's the single carburetor version. And as far as I was concerned, it was the coolest thing on the planet. I actually helped the bike shop sell that to another guy. And as it was leaving, it just broke my heart. The guy, it was too much bike for him and whatever. It came back like a month later, and I rubbed all my pennies together and bought it. It was the only machine I had for more of college than I should admit. It's just in upstate New York, only having a motorcycle is really ridiculous.
That's hard.
Yeah. And then the hair is related to the swimming. So it dries out your hair. And then if you just towel it off at the end of the day, it sort of does that. And I don't know. It was a thing I had going. So.
Well, so here's the thing is when I was a similar age, I also had that sort of thing going. So I just felt we were kindred spirits there. That's me in a pub in London on a study abroad program in college.
Perfect.
Probably had a few drinks at that point.
Might have happened, yeah.
But I didn't get that hair by swimming and being in the chat. There's like, oh my God. I didn't get that hair from swimming. I got that hair from dyeing it because I thought it made me look cool and that the girls would like it.
What did you study in school?
I was a theater and film major.
Cool.
So
that's what my brother did.
Rad. So yeah, we were studying theater in London, like going to all the shows and the National Theater and the Globe and all that stuff. Anyway, so all right, I got my joke about our dyed hair out of the way. So here, I want to hear about. And you've been interviewed a million times about this stuff, but I want to just hear, and I think folks at home want to hear a little bit about just if I understand correctly, you grew up in an aviation family, and you've been wrenching on stuff since you were like very wee, like a tiny kid. Is that accurate?
Aviation was around. My old man had a 172 when I was real little. That he had shared partnerships in, and then he had a Swift. The 172 justified being a pilot when you have, where there's 5 kids in my family, so having more seats made sense. But the Swift was really where his passion was. So he eventually gave up on the Cessna, and then as time went on, he got more and more into the Swift. We put a big motor in it. He set a world record in it, like a point-to-point deal, and it was kind of a big moment. It happened right about the time I was getting interested in motorcycles, like your photo, and so the idea of like a airplane is something that could be modified and like be a hot rod as opposed to like something you'd take to a bar, motorcycle, airplane, they're kind of different. It was sort of a pivotal point for me. But he was never a professional pilot, right? So all the aviation I had been exposed to was aviation as like for fun. Sure. Oshkosh was a really big deal where we would spend a whole week thinking about airplanes only. And I'd never we go to EAA meetings at my home chapter, and there you'd be around airplane people, but still it was like, a lot of old guys talking about old guy stuff. But Oshkosh always felt to me like it was just 100% airplanes all week, which is not something I got to experience elsewhere. And it really helped set that trajectory of what I wanted. It was like, well, you can do this all the time. Like, there are professional pilots and there are people that design airplanes, and like this is like a full-time thing. And like, well, that's where we got to be, right? So yeah, I was around aviation. We were working on airplanes, and I started doing jobs where I was working on airplanes, but it was not professional until high school, college.
Sure. I mean, I think so. Then here's, I think, the next sort of the journey for me that I'm curious about is like since we're brothers of the dyed hair.
Definitely.
Don't worry, folks. I'm getting people are now talking about my hair in the chat because I showed weakness to the internet. I'm getting a haircut tomorrow, so just like chill out. It's a pandemic.
Are they doing it in the garage, or you going somewhere?
I'm going somewhere. I go to like this. I've been seeing her for, I don't know, over a decade, and it's the Nobleman in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. If you're ever in town, and they run it like it's like a doctor's office now. Like it is it is like super clean, and like masks and like hand sanitizer and like all this stuff. Yeah, she cut my hair for my wedding. Gotta trust her. Anyway.
Yeah. No, definitely. No, there's I don't know in Wisconsin, but in California, there's like this surge of like illegal haircuts being done in garages where you go to the barber's garage, or the barber comes to your garage, and it's like hush hush, and suddenly your hair's short. Suddenly having like razor sides, like shows you're a rebel, because you're getting illegal haircuts.
It's not illegal. It's not illegal here, but you gotta wear a mask inside.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. That's it. And I don't know how she cuts around the I don't know. She's very good. Anyway. Okay. So let's talk about, so I finished college and I went to try to be an actor. That did not work because like,
what was that path like?
It was like go to auditions and then get depressed.
But I mean, you moved to LA, like
no. I was like Chicago, Milwaukee, like, which is like even a smaller pool. That might be part of it. Simultaneously,
was it like because Chicago has like a comedy scene, right?
I should have done that.
Guy? Okay, so you were doing like straight acting.
I should have. Yeah, I should have done the Second City thing.
I'm not like trying.
These are great ideas. Where were you 20 years ago?
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. So I guess what I'm saying is like I ended up getting into the film scene pretty quickly, going up the ladder as like like my experience, like I'm like working my way up to TV commercials and movies, right, in Chicago and stuff, and kind of on the other side of, almost concurrently, right, on the other side of the country, you're like headed towards spaceships, and so. So I'm just curious if you could give us a little rundown about that. Like, what is, because that's like the kind of stuff to like a film and theater guy just seems like impossible to like leave college and then go make like a meaningful impact. And I'm not saying art doesn't have a meaningful impact, but like go make a meaningful impact in like science and technology, like right away almost.
Well, I think, back to our dyed hair brethren, the camaraderie. I think there's something to be said for like pointing for something that's distant. And I grew up in Michigan. To end up in Mojave is a long way. Like it takes a lot of like, I don't know, silliness to take that on. So I think there's a lot related there. But no, for me, what it really came down to was, I'm in engineering school, and the engineering school I went to, upstate New York, was dominated by guys that were going to end up in like nuclear power. The school, Union College, is known for its electrical engineering program because GE's right there. So that was sort of the path guys were on. I was the only like airplane guy there. It's also a relatively theoretical school, not very particularly hands-on. So I came from a pretty hands-on background, working on radial engines and stuff back in Michigan, and working with my old man and all that stuff. So I was always looking for that sort of balance, something to sort of bring some practicality to what felt to me like engineering was almost without purpose. I think my favorite example is like calculus is really hard, right? And the way most schools do it is they make you learn calculus so that you're then allowed to go learn physics.
Sure.
Well, calculus is built around explaining physics. So like if you would do the physics first, you would see, oh, wow, like that, I need math to describe this thing I'm seeing. Oh, wow. Oh, okay. And then calculus happens, right? And that was sort of the struggle that for me with getting through engineering school was. And so as I'm sort of wrapping up my engineering education, like I'm spending more and more time thinking about Reno and thinking about warbirds and thinking about, Dreadnought has a 4360 and how much horsepower is that compared to how much power we're supposed to have? And, Streg is running, water injection. And what does that mean? And how do you calculate the horsepower? And it just didn't seem like there was a path like down the engineering route that was going to kind of get me there.
Sure.
And there wasn't a good model in the group of people that I was going to school with, or, alumni from that college, et cetera. And so that sort of forces you to kind of take the big shot, right? And internet was new. And like I said, I was spending too much time, reading about Reno and stuff. And so I made a list of the coolest companies I could think of. Right about that time, SpaceShip One had done its thing. The Global Flyer was doing its thing. It was setting its second record sort of during this time. John Sharp had released the Nemesis NXT. There was a guy, we were talking about Swifts earlier, Lopresti was releasing his Fury down in Florida.
Oh, sure.
The X-Core Easy Rocket. Anyway, I made a list of the coolest companies I could think of that looked like they were going to have that like blend of engineering and practicality where I was going to get to touch stuff. And they were like all in Mojave. Like the Lopresti's Fury is like a rad thing, but that was the only one that was not in Mojave. And I was like, man, it sounds like I just got to get to Mojave. And so, I put that motorcycle from your earlier picture on the back of the truck that I had by that time. And I, just drove out here and started knocking on doors and begging people for jobs until I was able to make it work. The problem with that moment was I wasn't the only one that was Googling Mojave and like realizing this was a hotbed. And so I kind of came in with this big influx, the sort of post tier one, the post SpaceShip One boom of Mojave, where just the place was being overrun with talent, like really, really sharp dudes. If you look at the history of scale, which is sort of dominates that time in my life, the last major project for Scaled was Voyager, right? That's, what was that, 1982? Like a long time ago, right?
Yeah.
So they kind of fallen off the radar, and they've been able to sort of operate without a lot of attention. The joke about Nirvana only became Nirvana because they were in Seattle and everybody was ignoring them. Like same thing, like for SpaceShip One to happen, like they kind of had to be left alone, right? Like guys had to take tremendous risks, and they had to like use all the craftsmanship they had and like eke everything out to make that happen. And it could only happen sort of in a vacuum, and that's what had happened. But now the town was sort of being overrun with talent. And so as a result, It went from sort of this sleepy thing to this like super competitive thing. I'm a competitive guy, like, swimming and stuff was something that was big for me. And it was fantastic for me to sort of get dumped into this pool of just swingers, man. I mean, like, when I look back on that time in my life, I can't believe how lucky I was to be, Scaled, yes, Mojave, yes, experimental aircraft, yes, but to be around like 5-10 guys that wanted exactly the same thing out of the world that I did and had the same number of hours in the day that I did, right? Getting paid the same number of dollars I was, right? Like, we're all trying to figure out how to put it together. And, how we all came out, but like having someone in the lane next to you, just like swimming, like, oh, he's going. Like, are we going?
Yeah.
Because he's going. Was super valuable. The professional stuff, SpaceShip One led to SpaceShip Two. SpaceShip Two was hard. It's a hard program. With SpaceShip Two and SpaceShip One and all the notoriety that came out of that came a lot of other programs where there was a lot of stuff going on at Scaled, and a lot of what makes Burt is that like ability to sell the impossible, and the success of SpaceShip One gave him that much more of a podium to stand on to say I can do the impossible, and we just got influx of like super hard programs, and combine that with a bunch of new guys. All these old guys were getting challenged with new challenges, and like you're getting to see sort of under the skirt of how much of it is magic in the asphalt of the Scaled Composites place, and how much of it is Burt being this incredible, whatever you want to call Burt, and how much of it is like just time and place. And it was a perfect thing that led up to SpaceShip One. But anyway, it was fantastic indoctrination into what ends up being like a really competitive marketplace, right? I mean, home-built airplanes, they're fun, but the world, the Scaled Composites prototype, new airplanes, rocket powered, vertical takeoff, experimental long endurance. Like, these are like hard problems, and you got to have your stuff together to get the program, let alone finish it and have some sort of success. Am I rambling yet?
No, this is amazing. I can guarantee you that you've been inspired at least, it looks like 3 engineers in the chat. Guys are talking about some people just separately, like people are like talking about they agree with the calculus. Andrew's saying I had a simpler experience with calculus, something about kinematics. I don't even know what these words are, guys. I'm just a film guy. Wait, this is the one. Jacob Lindsay says he's totally right. Way too common with the calc and the calc-based physics thing. The most I took, guys, just for reference, is I took physics for the artist, which was like I went to the University of Wisconsin. That was like their way of like getting you to like choke down some math if you were like you're like a film major. They're like, all right, like here's how color works, and like here's how light and film, and like it was actually interesting, but it was like there was a lot of people in those classes being like, yeah, I just want to go back to making sculptures, and I'm like, no, this is cool. I wish I had stuck with the calc thing. Anyway, so. Okay, so and I heard, and I don't want to jump too much, but I heard you just did an interview recently for EAA, and I heard you talk a little bit about how that competitive nature of having those like-minded people and those people that are struggling against the same problems and solving the same problems is kind of what pushed you over to the home-built side to get into Reno and do some stuff, Formula One stuff, right? Like, would you say, looking back on it now, like making that effort, did that have the desired effect of where? I mean, I don't know. You've bounced around into all these amazing test programs, and you're doing stuff at Sanders now. Like, would you go back and like? Because I don't remember. You said something about your wife and you like built this plane in a week or something. I don't remember what it was.
I think so. The quote was, we traded 2.5 to 3 years of our lives. So we were working 2,000 hours a year outside of work to design and build that airplane just as fast as we could because of the competitive world that we were living in. And it was a trade for, a first flight. If my career path is to be a test pilot, that was the most valuable thing I could have in my resume. And I was willing to trade, whatever it is, every free dollar and every free hour I had for 3 years to have that experience. So I think what you're asking is, like, was it worth it, or would there be anything that I would do different? That's a hard question. I appreciate it. I think that the competitive stuff, I would say it a different way. I would say the most important advice I would have for myself at 25, or for someone who's watching who's 25, is that the guys, once you get into these, whatever your world is, right? If you're going to be competitive at 25, most of the players, like their trajectories will change, but these guys aren't going anywhere, right? So you can figure out how to like work with them and go do great things. Like, that's obvious. You can create a rivalry, right? But whatever you do, you're gonna live with these guys. So I think we all had this short-term goal of becoming astronauts. SpaceShip 2 was going to, Pete or Mike or somebody was going to do the first couple flights, and they were going to clear the envelope. But there was going to be some like in between flights where the vehicle was just going to fly, and people were going to be sitting in the front moving the controls. There was going to be guys sitting in the back, and they were all going to become astronauts. And I was not going to miss my opportunity. I mean, I remember doing the math with like sitting around with guys drinking beer, at the hangar or whatever, and like doing the math on what was the youngest person to become an astronaut and who still could get it, right?
Sure.
I think that got a little bit in the way of recognizing that no matter what, right? Say what you want about SpaceShip 2, but SpaceShip 2 was not going to be a part of our lives in 5 years, 10 years, whatever it was, right? And after that, these would be guys that you could team with to do amazing things, right? And the guys that I've been able to maintain relationships with, that relationship has been awesome. Because again, when am I ever again in my life going to be in such a concentrated environment of guys that are so focused? Like right, we were joking earlier, and you put your Instagram feed stuff with your babies and mortgages and like all this stuff that's like in the way now. Like 24 years old, straight out of college, like I was living in a shack. I was driving a 1965 Ford Falcon, so I didn't have to pay liability insurance. Like everything was going into this topic, right? And to be around a bunch of other dudes, that's an unusual moment. And I wish I could have had the foresight to see like, boy, we'd be better off just getting ready to build the next company, right? If that makes any sense, rather than getting too wound up about who's going to make the next milestone.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I think, and I was joking earlier, but I think there's a lot of parallels in every like competitive based industry. Without getting off of airplanes too much, like they're same thing in the film industry. And the biggest takeaway I have now is that something you just said. You said a lot of things that resonated with me, but one of the things you just said that really resonated was the idea of like, you know, the concentration of talent and you know, of the group of people I went to film school with. It's less about which one of us went off to become the next Spielberg, because frankly, none of us did. But it was about which one of us went which way and how can we work together now, right? I've got a friend in LA who's making movies with Childish Gambino and all that stuff, and that's awesome. And he and I still text a little bit about how we can work together, and even if it's just advice, right? And that experience and those relationships are so valuable. So valuable. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Although it's hard not to get seduced by the astronaut goal.
So hard. And to be honest, like as I'm saying this, I remember guys that were more network focused at that time. And I remember the way that I looked at them. And I remember thinking like, he's not a player. Like he's not taking my ride. And like, so, you know, whatever. I mean, to your point, where would we be, you know, if we'd done something different? I don't know. I know that the experiences that I've had are phenomenal. I can't believe how lucky I am. I think that, you know, you talk about going back and doing it over. I don't think I could be as lucky as I've been. I think the likelihood that I would end up in such a good spot as I am right now is low. So I don't know that I would roll the dice and try again. It's just an unbelievably lucky, you know, moment that was happening in Mojave, and, you know, Nemesis being, you know, when I applied to Nemesis, John had the gear had collapsed. He slid across his belly down the runway. So he was never more approachable in his career. And that's just happened to be when I reached out. Like, oh, sure. Perfect. Right.
Sure.
And then, you know, the fact that I was just starting to get test pilot chops when Chiavetta needed somebody to take Daryl's spot in the most badass, you know, legacy that's ever, maybe the badass sport class plane that's ever, certainly the most badass, I'll just say badass 1,000 times.
It's cool.
Hired gun flying experience that was happening at Reno. I mean, I can't believe that happened.
Which, by the way, I mean, I don't think this is the same thing, but you sent over some cool, I'll play them while we talk about, like, this is the kind of stuff that you're talking about. Like, this isn't Reno, is it? I don't know. It's
so this is
low-key 780 is what the file name was.
Right. But, so this is simulated engine out at Mojave.
Right. Okay.
So this is a Lancer Legacy configured for racing. So it's a 2-seat side-by-side airplane. That right seat is full of a water tank and then another water alcohol tank. And those are pumps for those two individual systems. One spraying water on the outside of the engine, one spraying water on the inside of the engine. But the point I'm saying there is that this is a very high-pressure racing airplane, right? So it's a 300 horsepower engine. We pushed up to 750 horsepower. It was a big point of contention on that program that I wanted to be proficient on dead stick landings. This is me practicing a dead stick landing at Mojave. For that customer, I ended up doing something like 6 to 12 emergency landings with everything from blown up turbos to pushing rods to the side of the case to gear problems. So I think it was the right move that I was aggressive about requesting or being pushy about doing the dead sticks, like the one that you're filming here, or that you're showing. Since you're playing it again, I appreciate that. The big thing that I think to visualize is the L over D, right? So this is like a 2.5 to 1 to 3 to 1 L over D on approach. This is very conservative. So the prop is at high RPM, the gear's down. This was a flapless configuration, so there weren't flaps, but the prop in the gear makes a lot of drag. What makes it worse is that, you know, we can go through the physics of it, but basically once the drag gets above a certain point, you don't have enough energy to change the velocity vector from down to forward. So you actually have to go faster on the approach so that you have enough energy to flare. So I'm at gear speed for this whole, which of course means you come down faster. And so what happens is right there, there's a tendency, because there's ground rush, there's significant ground rush. You know, you're doing 140 knots coming down at 3 to 1. And there's a tendency to flare early, and you get one flare. by the time you flare the second time, it stalls and drops a wing, and it's a bad day. So the reason that so that's the backdrop, and then the reason this is a payoff is that a couple months after this, we pushed a rod through the case at Reno, and that was the big emergency landing. That maybe I got lucky, or there's a lot of ways that the engine could have failed. It happened to fail in a way that I had practiced a lot, but certainly there were a lot of eyes on me at that moment. It would have been easy to make myself look really dumb. And
I was gonna say this.
I got away with it.
This file, I was like, I know what this is. There's gonna
I saw this, but with smoke coming out of the car.
Yeah, I was like, what is this? So I guess though, explain. I don't know how to ask this question, but when I think about risk and flying, and obviously I'm a very different pilot. I have a very different set of experiences than you do in terms of not as much, but also just the way I'm flying and the application of science to my flying is not as the same, right? So the way you describe that, I get it, right? I get what you're talking about, but that's not the kind of stuff I think about when I fly as a recreational pilot, right? So I guess what I'm getting at is when you decided, for me as a person who's trying to avoid those things as much as possible, right? And you're out there trying to find those places, basically for those of people like me, right? Or the customer of the aircraft, right?
Sure.
What part of that? I mean, I think I get the science side, the engineering, the intellectual side of that, and why that's really exciting. What else brought you to? Was it? I mean, we talked a little bit about the astronaut part of the trajectory, huh? But is there
trajectory? That was good. I like that.
It just came out. Yeah, it's good. But what else draws you to this? Because I see you're putting out all this content right now that's amazing. I watch you working on things like the Raptor or the was it the Stewart Mustang? You've got the Bowers Pony, things that are all different types of aircraft, and there's a fair amount of risk, but also a fair amount of work that goes into mitigating that. What drew you to that part of this? To the equation?
Yeah, so these are the bare bones stuff. So I apologize if I stumble a little bit. I think it comes back to what we were talking about before, right? I mean, being in engineering school and you're getting the analytical side, right? And then I'm going to the shop and we're building warbirds, and I'm getting the super practical side, lefty loosey, righty tighty, safety wire, lock nut stuff. The bridge is the practical application of the aircraft, right? And I think more and more recently I realized that there's it's 22-year-old guy stuff, right? There's a frontal lobe, testosterone, I need to prove I'm the best, whatever, If he did 4 snap rolls, I'm going to do 5. And that's, whatever. I can admit that I'm competitive, but I think the side of the equation that I didn't really appreciate, really till I left Scaled, is that you mentioned Raptor, right? Getting all the pieces to come together, right? And come together. I remember when we were swimming, right? And someone said, "Well, you're the best, whatever this year." And I was like, "It's not the best this year. It's the best this month, the best this week, the best this morning, right? Right. It's all about timing that crescendo of performance, right? And the same thing's happening, but now you're doing it with an owner and a mechanic and an aerodynamicist and airline schedules trying to get across the country, and it's very, very interesting. And it was a whole piece of that part of that problem that I didn't have to deal with at Scaled, because at Scaled there was a different level of understanding what was going on. Everybody was there, loved flight test. Everybody was there, understood the value of a test pilot. Everybody was there, understood that analysis was one thing and what you built was another, and what you flew was going to be something else. And they all had value. You can't do without any of them, but they're all different. And as you get out in the world, and I think we're applying that. I think we're using that to add value to other people's programs. But it's just not like you said, it's not a common thing that people think about when they fly airplanes, right? So, and it just makes such a tremendous learning experience, right? You had mentioned getting into experimental in order to get this kind of experience, like, yeah, I think I was interested in Reno all along. I think Reno was going to be a part of my life either way. It was all I thought about when I was a kid. But the thing about experimental aircraft in the U.S. is that like go build it. So you know everything, so you know nothing, right?
Right.
The day you order the tail kit for your RV may be the first day you punch a rivet, right? And you'll figure it out, right? And then you run your first wire and you do your first termination. You're like, okay, there's my, and you work your way through it. And so as much as the problem with EAA or the problem with this career path is that there's no moats to it, right? In Europe, you have to get a professional test pilot that's rated by their FAA to do the first flight on your home build.
Oh, okay.
Which means there's a moat around the business, right? Which means you can actually charge a living wage to do the thing, right? Here, there's no requirement. So that means that every time I show up for a gig, I'm competing against every PPL, CPL on the airport. And newsflash, we're Grinch. We're always the Grinch who stole Christmas, right? Every time. Because I'm not going to bring good news. I can't show up and say you already flew, right? All I can do is show up and say either, we're going to fly as early as you hoped, or less than that, right? Because
right.
So right. I can't bring good news, and so as a result, like it's not a place from a financial standpoint that makes a lot of sense. But meanwhile, like the lessons, like I had to build. We talked about building Siren took 2.5, 3 years, whatever it was. Like that's a lot of work for an hour of flying, 10 hours of flying, whatever it was.
Right.
Boy, if I can get somebody to just invite me to their hangar to see their project, right? We learn stuff, right? And if you're in there in the context of operating it, there's another layer, right? And you get to talk to the designer and fill in those things that I'm fundamentally curious about, right? And now that I've left Scaled, you mentioned Sanders. Like Sanders isn't going to be designing the next airplane to compete with Proteus or the next commercial rocket, right? And there's fundamentally one Scaled. There's not enough room in the market for another one, right? So so this is a skill set that ends up almost being like a hobby. Like it's just something that I personally enjoy. I'm passionate about it. I wake up, it's all I think about before I go to bed. It's all I think about in the morning. Today at lunch, my wife was like, "Can we talk about something else?" And like she's been with me for 12 years, 15 years. She's still tired of it.
And and I will say, to drive your point home, she's also a pilot, and like
she's got 6 emergency landings in home built aircraft as PIC. Yeah. Right? Like, I mean, she lives this. She was administrative assistant to all the test pilots at Scaled for a long time. She lives it, right? And the point isn't, my wife is amazing. That wasn't the point I was trying to make.
No, I think that's the point I was trying to make. Is that
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you bailing me out there. Probably watching downstairs, I'm hearing the grumbles through the floorboards. But no, she's fantastic. But yeah, I wish, a lot of times, you wish you could be into something simpler, right? I mean, just like any of this aviation stuff, it's a hard way to make a living. It's a hard way to make a living because it's freaking cool, right? I mean, this is an easy thing to be passionate about. It's an easy thing to excuse yourself pouring money into for no reason, right? And so I feel fortunate to have had the experiences I have had, and I know that I can apply them to other things that I've done, but it still ends up being my priority. So did I answer your question?
I think so. I don't know. Doesn't matter. There's no rules here. There are no rules. I have a question for you, though. Sure. And a bunch of people have questions for you, and the hour is blowing by. This is really fun. I wanted to ask you, so you left that after Scaled, let's say. You've done all these various test programs. Is there one? I mean, there are certain ones that, for instance, like the emergency landing at Reno, the twerp program we talked a little bit. There's a Red Bull thing. People can go learn about that if they want to. Some things that kind of become like high or more, they become more like universal knowledge, right? Because they're either exciting or dramatic, right? I wanted to ask you, what's the thing that you've done that either nobody knows about or the thing that you're just the proudest about, like with Wasabi?
I have to go back to, and I apologize. You mentioned the EAA interview, so I apologize if this is repetitive. But
I mean, I don't know if anyone else watched that. I don't care.
The designing and building the Siren, it started as a very professional thing. My wife and I had been campaigning the Casset. She was crew chief, and we were, she was a pilot, and we were working on the airplane and learning together how to, maintain an experimental aircraft and modify it. And I remember we did a cowling, and there's an Instructables, it's still on the web, on how we built the cowling for the Casset. And that was, that was open between Jen and I, that was a dry run for the Siren, that we were doing that to prove ourselves to go do the Siren.
Sure.
And you sort of head off down this journey. I remember there's a photo on the the old Wasabi blog of me standing in front of aircraft windshield with the canopy that ended up flying on Wasabi. I had a no shit panic in the car on the way from whatever's Los Alamos back to Mojave, because I'd spent $300 on a canopy. I was like, oh no, I'm committed now. Watch out. So to go from there, so all the way to finishing it, and flying it, and there was that moment. Jen and I've been talking. They said, the airplane's not an airplane unless it goes to Oshkosh. So how do we get to Oshkosh? And neither of us, we've been trailering engines across the country for the Sharps, and doing that stuff with the race trailers. And enough of that. She said, we're not going if we don't fly. And so we're trying to figure out how to fly. And then fast forward to like over the Mississippi, looking across at Justin, my best friend, business partner, and my wife in the right seat of his airplane. We took off at 3:00 in the morning, and now we're on the downhill. We're going to make it to Oshkosh, sitting in the cockpit that I, laid out with my wife, years before, setting a record, came screaming into Oshkosh. They put us in a holding pattern for 30 minutes over the airport. And then we got to do, I think, 2 low passes. And came screaming over the the south side of the airport, and I could look down and see where one year my dad and I had gotten stuck way out in the boonies in the Swift, camping under the wing. It was actually the last year we camped, because after that we did the dorms, and I could see the spot where we had camped. And now I'm showing up in the air show with my wife, just set a record. I don't think you can do much better. That's amazing. So yeah, I think as far as emotional, that was a big win, and a nice way to kind of feel like you did something, right? Even if flight test is silly and the test pilot thing doesn't work out, and Jen and I end up running a liquor store or something, that's real stuff, which is cool.
That's super real and cool.
Sorry, was that too much? Did I go too far down?
No, that was great. That was amazing. Come on, that's great. That was also, we can we got to come up with a name for your liquor store.
All right, I'm in.
Just be wasabi liquor. I don't know. We'll have to come up with something. Let's answer. Some people have some questions for you as expert test pilot here. David Barbalet asked, as an experience, I think he meant experimental builder, when do you recommend bringing in the test pilot in a program? Earlier design review?
Yeah, that is, especially in the light of the recent stuff that's been on the web, that's a fantastic question. So thank you. Fundamentally, there's no such thing as too soon, right? Just like I said earlier, I'm an airplane dork, Justin's an airplane dork. I take emails all the time for all kinds of projects that don't happen, or that are still years from happening. That's fine. I think the most important thing, right, about that question is you're picking up on the stuff we've been trying to communicate, which is when you call the guy expecting him to, literally jump from the airliner into the seat, to turn the mag switch, that's a lot. And, we talked about there's PPLs and CPLs out there that can do that stuff. But if you're bringing in a test professional, especially independent of whether or not I want to, because I always want to. That's the hardest part, is you always want to go fly. Independent of whether I want to, I can't. This is not a good idea. I have a family, I have a reputation. I'm a technical person. If I'm just a cannonball rider. Anyway, so the sooner the better. I think a lot of times the next hurdle is getting someone on site, right? If you're in the opposite side of the country, how do you work that? And we can work that stuff. I think the biggest thing that I'm trying to do with our branding and with the YouTube videos is try to lay the rest of the foundation for just this question about what it is that we do, or someone like us would do, is that it's not jumping out of the airliner and into the to turn the mags on, right? There's other services that we provide, and in early phases of a design program, that's Justin and I both worked for Burt doing that, right? Going to design reviews and talking about loads and talking about structure and systems and how failures can work together to get you in trouble. And Yeah, and we'd love to be a part of it. So I think our rates are competitive, and I think the stuff we're talking about, like looking at a specification or looking at a design review, like these aren't big expenses in the grand scheme of things. And what you're really doing as a builder is getting the test pilot invested in the project, right? Like if I show up off the street, like I have no investment, like everything about this is scary, right? But if you and I have rapport and I understand the compromises that got you there, like that's going to make everything easier. Because for the record, like from getting out of the airliner to like being done with however much flying we're playing, that's hard stuff that has to happen, like emotionally hard. Like it's never easy. Like the number of times like I've sat across from a spaghetti home cooked meal with designer, builder, wife, a couple invested, family members, etc. And like we just had an exhausting day, right? Where we're like all like he's trying to remember why he did something. We're trying to like hit the books and figure out what's good enough. Like everybody is exhausted. You're like, well, we're planning to fly Wednesday, so like we better keep moving. This is hard, and if it wasn't awesome, it wouldn't be worth it. But luckily, it's awesome.
So I mean, and I said to you before the show, like I think a large part of what you do is diplomacy, because I feel like because aviation is so special, and we talk about that a lot in this show, like it feels like superhuman, right? Like what we're doing is superhuman. It raises the emotional stakes and everything. And so I can't imagine spending all that time and maybe not having someone engaged early enough or not being able to engage someone early enough and then saying like, hey, like this thing is going to break and it's going to kill you when it breaks or whatever. Like that's a hard conversation. It's a very real conversation. Wow, we're getting serious tonight, Elliot. I like this.
I appreciate it. Burt always talked about question, never defend. And that was exactly what he was talking about. There's a thing that happens. In his case, he was talking about an airplane you had just built to the person who paid for you to build it as you're working towards the milestones that could damage the vehicle. And that you would say to them, it's safe. I fixed it, everything, we went through the whole list, everything's safe. And his point was that after you've done that, anything you find, you're going to be tempted to hide because you said it was safe a month ago. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem, right? Like he calls, a customer calls and says, hey, okay, it's ready. We're ready. Come on out, right? Like boots on the ground. Everything is that, right? Everything that you find is like, he has to give justification for like, no, this is why that's okay. And like, for me, like we've had many moments where I haven't even decided it's a showstopper. Like I'm just trying to figure out like, is this what's there, right? But because of the dynamic, like it gets hard very quickly. And I think that's what your the question was about, and it's very insightful. Because everybody always talks about the next thing that happens in that conversation is the owner says, well, I don't want you to get hurt. Your safety is my priority. And I'm like, don't do that. Like, I'm not getting in the airplane if I think my safety's at risk. Let's talk about all the hard work that you spent building that thing, or all the millions of dollars of somebody else's money that they're going to come collecting, right? When something terrible happens. Let's talk about that, right? Because my safety isn't, if my safety is a concern, there's problems with me. I'm not doing my job.
Right.
But yeah, no, that's the question never defend thing. And that was that's why Burt's Burt, right? Nobody's done it more than Burt. And there's a lot to be said for that.
Rock on, man.
Did I lose everybody? Was that just like I'm getting dark? I'm sorry.
No, you're not getting. This is real stuff, man. I mean, I guess it's kind of answering the question I was asking before too. Is like why, like you have passion for something that is one, super hard, two, like the various skills you need to do it are so diverse. I think that's what always impresses me about watching you guys in the content you create is that you have, not only do you have to be a good stick, right? But you've got to have all this engineering knowledge and all of this aeronautic, like it's just like there's a lot of layers into what you're doing versus what most of us are doing on a day-to-day basis. So it's hard, and then separately, it's hard on the ground, and then, but I think without it, like how do we innovate, right? Like how do we have the Burts or the sirens or the, like, how do we have any of that innovation if we aren't having people putting in that hard work? So I don't think you're losing anybody. I think it's just the reality of, it's an unforgiving, I mean, I was going to say a hobby, right? But it's like, it's an unforgiving, what's that old saw about how things, unforgiving aviation or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, let's answer. Before we wrap up for the night, because we're almost out of time. I want to answer a couple more questions. I was gonna serve this up in our little aviation game short final, but Ben says, "What is your favorite plane to fly just for fun, and why is it the Champ signed a Champ driver?"
Oh, that's good. It's funny you bring up the Champ. Working for Sanders has been really eye-opening. He's a really impressive guy in terms of what he's been able to do building that company, et cetera. And there's always this moment where you take people into his shop, right? So he's a famous warbird restorer, collector, museum, and you walk into the big hangar, right? The hangar he's famous for. And right now I think there's 7 Sea Furies, 5 Sea Furies. And then there's the Twin Beach and the T6. This beautiful hangar, beautiful floor, and the up front, in the front of the hangar, is the Champ. And why is the Champ in the front of the hangar? Because Dennis thought that the most valuable thing, the next airplane to buy, was an airplane for employees and for his father-in-law to fly, nights and weekends on the grass strip next to the runway. And I always thought that said a lot about Dennis. And they say that what makes a business, what makes a founder, what makes a good business leader, and it's all about being able to bring in good people, right? That's the most important skill. And with Dennis, it's the Champ. So so the short answer is that at work, we fly the Champ probably more than I should admit. It's an uncontrolled strip in the middle of nowhere, and so you're doing those figure eights where you land both upwind and downwind in the Champ.
Awesome.
There's a radio, but I'm always really sure how to turn it on. It's freaking awesome. So Champs, lately there's been a lot of fun flying in Champs. My old man's a Cub guy. He turned into a Cub guy recently, and there's a lot of grass strips near his place. We're going back for a wedding soon, so I'm looking forward to flying with him. But I think, if anything, I don't spend enough time doing the fun flying, and that's something we're trying to work on. So actually, I've been doing a little bit of 233 flying up in Tehachapi, flying gliders, which has been nice. Change of pace. I hadn't flown 233. I started flying 233s back in Michigan when I was 14 or whatever, and it's been nice to get back into and remember all those idiosyncrasies about such a strange airplane that, despite they built a lot of them anyway. So
absolutely. That's awesome. My first ever ride in a glider, I almost hurled because it was a rough day. There's a video about that, but but it, I still want to come back to it, and I think it also is a skill set thing. It feels like it reinforces a lot of the stuff that we need, but I don't
the thing that gets me. Sorry, and you're like, can we wrap this up?
No, I'm not trying to wrap it up, dude. I'll go a whole another hour if you want. I don't care. There are no rules.
So you walk up to the glider port, right? And there's a Pawnee with a driver in it. There's a glider with an instructor and a student. There's a wing holder. There's a bunch of people that are moving gliders back and forth, these awkward machines. They're on weird wing wheels and all this stuff. And compare that to Reno. That's actually really freaking dangerous. All the stuff that we just talked about, right? And this is happening way more than Reno, right? I mean, every weekend there's there's got to be 20, 50? How many glider ports are there in the United States?
Sure.
Flying on? And these procedures have been developed, right, where you can have this distributed responsibility and system of everybody knows what's going to happen when this happens and that happens. It's every as complex as lost IFR approach, right? And more so because there's more people involved. This is happening all the time. Wow. And it's old systems. There's hardly any radio use. It's very inspiring in terms of getting groups of people to do high risk stuff together. Super cool.
I've never thought of it that way, but now I'm only going to think about it that way. I mean, I think everything is whenever we identify these processes, right? You brought up Reno, and there's a question that came up about Reno. Race 22 crew says, oh, that's weird. Let me move that over so you can read it. With the Reno air races canceled this year, was wondering if you had a ride plan for this year, and do you plan on competing next year? Also, great job on the new longer format of your videos.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, so we had a couple things in the works that I was really excited about. That obviously with the races canceled, we've changed direction, but we were planning to compete, doing the wasabi knot thing, at a minimum. There's other stuff in the works. I think, boy, I don't want to go down the Corona rabbit hole, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens, when everybody gets a forced year off, right? Like, you can see the teams that have been using this time where they didn't have to blow up an engine coming up in September to go faster. And there's going to be teams that, all of a sudden forget about their race planes, and there's going to be all the stuff, right? And I'm curious to see what happens in the sport. It's in such a dynamic moment right now with the unlimited class sort of handing the guard to the sport class. And then the stole stuff, and what does it mean to go to the event? I live near Willow Springs Racetrack in Roseman. That's a racing event that happens every weekend, no crowd. It's a very different financial setup than what Reno is, right? Reno exists to like sell beer and tickets, right? That's how the economy works. Well, I mean, what if it was set up just because like a guy wanted to fly his Sea Fury real low? Like, how would we do that? Like we don't sell tickets, or maybe, we make instead of giving a purse to the guy that flies Sea Fury, we do the opposite. We charge him, to have someone stand out at all the pylon. Now in the Sea Fury, it's an expensive airplane to operate, right? But in a Glass Air, I don't know. I know that Reno's been very rewarding for me, having a place to technically compare performance of aircraft, to work on pilotage and procedures and all the stuff that goes in was super valuable. I would hate for it to go away. And I know that the not having Voodoo and Strega running around changes the dynamic, and it would be a shame for because of a dip in beer sales, this beautiful thing that's been built goes away. So sorry, am I rambling?
No, you're not rambling at all. I think I was just thinking about we did this film shoot a couple weeks ago for a university, and we had this football player. He's a junior. It's gonna be his senior year, and we're like, what are you gonna do with COVID? Like the football season, they were already canceled. They weren't a Big Ten school, and he's like, I'm just gonna use this time to get strong. Like I'm just gonna take it as a gift. I'm gonna get super strong. And I was like, whoa. One, I did not. I would have been like, I'm gonna eat a ton of pizza, right? Like I would have been like, it's a time for a break. And he was
earned it.
Yeah, and he's like, I'm gonna get so strong. And I was like, that is amazing.
That's awesome.
So I think you're right though. Like they're the teams, the Reno teams that are like, this is an opportunity. This thing's gonna go 1,000 miles an hour faster next year, and because we have time, right? The luxury of time. So, okay, I got one more thing for you before we sign off for the night. We play this game on here once in a while called Short Final, where I ask you it's a game with no points, but you have to win all the points. Okay. And we got a minute to answer a whole bunch of aviation questions, just the first thing that pops in your head. We answered a bunch of these already, though. All right, this is a very professional show. All right, I'm going to put on some dramatic music that you can't hear, but they'll be able to. And I'm just going to ask you a bunch of questions. Okay, here's the music. Okay. All right, hit the timer. All right, Elliot, tail wheel or nose wheel? Which one you got?
Tail wheel.
All right, what about your favorite warbird?
Corsair.
Ooh, okay. No one's ever said that before, and I agree. Okay, favorite civilian aircraft?
185.
Ooh. What about best? I mean, we talked about it a little bit. I think I know what the answer is going to be. It's not fair when I steal all your seconds in the lead up to the question. Favorite airport you've ever landed at?
It's Kern Valley, up near here. It's in a valley near a lake. It's awesome.
Oh, okay. I thought it was going to be like, gosh, duh, we talked about it. All right. What about, I have a question for you. What's the worst airplane ever made?
Oh, boy. Yeah, I'm the wrong guy to ask that question. Yeah, I'm going to run the clock out. Sorry.
That's all right. All right. I want to ask you then separately, is there a, wait, let me, okay. Got to ask you this last thing. every airplane needs to be what color? If you could have any airplane paint it.
There aren't enough black airplanes.
That's true, man. I think that's why the Dark Arrow guys are getting all the... It's just because it's black. It looks good.
Yeah.
So let's talk about real quick before we wrap up tonight. That was like the clumsiest I've ever gone through that short final thing.
It's my fault. I'm sorry.
No, it was totally my fault. Yeah, there's a lot of things we could talk about here. I wanted to ask you anything on the horizon people should know about. Obviously, you've got a couple different test programs happening right now that people are watching. They've got the Bowers Pony stuff, seems like it's ongoing. Raptor was big video released this week. Anything else that people should be watching out for that you can talk? I know a lot of times you can't talk about this stuff.
Yeah, that's the big issue, right? I mean, very little actually of what we do we get to talk about. It's all typically owned by the customer. I think the big thing, as far as things to watch for, is it's terrifying, but we're working towards these really long format releases. It seems like the people are responding to them in terms of both the whatever viewership, that's fine, but also I think it's helping people understand what it is we do, and that's fundamentally the goal is to do this stuff full time. The more people understand the service you offer, the better. So there was a comment earlier about the long format stuff. I look to the releases as a chance for technical feedback. I don't know how to edit video, but whatever the video editing stuff. But I'm excited to see how that conversation can go forward. I think when we started recording, it was really initially about managing customers and like making sure that you could prove you did what they asked you to do, even though it didn't have the desired results. But once you have, I have like 30 terabytes right now of footage of me flying. And once you start doing that, it gives you a chance to refly every moment over and over again. And when you get ready to go fly a new airplane, I can watch a whole flight and I can look at where my hands went. It's been a fantastic self-review thing. As I get comfortable telling more and more of the story publicly, there's more of an opportunity to get the feedback from the world. So aviation is one of those things where everybody's got a hill to die on. There's their way to do it's the only way, but it's a big world and everybody's got a different answer to that. And it's been really interesting to see all the things that the world knows that turns out are really valuable, or they're not valuable, but you don't realize they're not valuable till you hear that, and then you can put it together. So I'm excited about the conversation. It's super high risk as far as professional responsibility and everything, but I'm excited about it. It's exciting time. So.
A lot of folks in the chat right now responding to that, saying, keep the long formats coming. Jake Lindsay says, I did like the long video, would like to see even more technical stuff. Which I don't have the engineering background that you guys have, but I was really interested in that. And I also thought that one of the interesting things for me was I needed to be sure. What I kept checking was I would be watching and like understanding something, and then I would have to check myself to make sure I wasn't understanding it incorrectly. Like, was I tying two systems together that weren't tied together or whatever, as like a lay person in the field, right? But that's something that clearly you were considering in the edit, though. But
yeah, I mean that's the hurdle that we have. We don't own the critters that we're working on. So in that case, Peter asked us to do a deep dive video and talk about what we had done and how we had come to the conclusions that we'd come to. So we had an unusual opportunity to be very open. But at the same time, there's a lot of stuff in there where we're just showing and we're intentionally sort of not commenting, right? Because there's a lot of questions that we're still trying to figure out, just like we were talking about earlier. Like there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, and it turns out you've only seen some of them. And so that's a good point, and probably an intentional miss, but a miss in the most recent video where we could have described what we were seeing and the context for it and why. And there's reasons why we couldn't do it on that video, but there's not a reason we couldn't do it in the future. So it's good. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I think you guys should keep doing those. I think they're really fun. Nothing else. And I really want to know who that guy is who knows so much about the guy yelling at you in the truck. Who is that guy? Can you talk about that? No?
Yeah.
You don't have to.
No. The engine quit. The airplane was stranded. There was, airplanes turning around on the runway because we were kind of blocking two taxiways. there was a moment where it was like, first is to secure the airplane, like, is it on fire? We're still getting to know stuff. And then there's like, what's the next move? Are we going to tow the airplane? Are we going to try to get it started? Will it start? Yada, yada. So there's like confusion. Justin's got earbuds in, so he can't hear anything. Peter approached the airplane from the opposite side than I approached from. And right after we pull up, this truck pulled up behind me, like closer than I would have liked, not within the platform of the airplane, but close, and kind of like just stood. The guy got out and just stood right behind me. And so I turned around and I was like, hello. And he was like, hello. And he like didn't move. And the Corona thing means that our like personal boundaries are different. And I was pretty nervous at the moment. And I was like, if you don't mind, can you just take a step back? And anyway, so he chased me down later. I happened to have the camera on, and so it got recorded. But he just gave me a dressing down about how he knew more about airplanes and he was trying to help. And he knows more about airplanes than I do, so he should be able to help. And I have the recording, and it's like, man, just introduce yourself. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, it didn't appear you were trying to help. I think the short answer is like somebody was talking about barriers to aviation, and like that passion that we all have for aviation means that like we build this huge fiefdom in our minds of how much we've invested. And I've spent all this time being who I am, and and then like all those things end up being barriers to people that are coming in, right? Like, I've never been to that airport before. I could have been anybody, right? And there's no reason to yell at anybody. And I don't say that to comment on him. I say that to comment on me. There's a lot of stuff people talk about our fist pumps, right? Like the fist pump thing gets a lot of press. Well, the reason the fist pump is like there's a normal thing. Like a cool airplane's taxiing by and you sit there and you're watching him, and like we've all been there. We're like, I'm sitting here on my in my Birkenstocks and he's sitting in that badass jet. Like, that's not any fun. And then he's gonna swing over and see you and he's gonna give that right back. And now we're just filling this airport, this thing that we all love, with all this nastiness. Like, forget that. Like, fist pumps are like, dude, you're killing it. You're having a great day. And he gives them back and he's like, don't worry, buddy. You're going to kill it tomorrow. And that is like, that's what we're here for, right? I mean, this is a silly thing. Like, the airports are in the middle of nowhere. There's nobody there. They're rusty hangars full of dust. Like, there's no reason to do this except that it's awesome. Like, let's admit that it's awesome. Why do we have to be jerks? Sorry, was that too much?
No, it's not too much. But here's the thing. You are in very good company with that passion and that idea of like communicating like through the cockpit glass. I had the opportunity to meet the F-22 Raptor demo pilot, and I actually have it on my videos. He's doing like all the like Thunderbird warrior signs to me with the camera, and then in the most recent EAA video with the like has-been demo pilots, they're like, the other demo was like razzing him, like, hey, why are you doing that? Like, what do you like think you're so cool? And he's like, because I can't talk to anybody.
Right.
I can't talk to the kids over there, but I can like make cool symbols with my hands and stuff and like let them know this is awesome. Right. Like, this is super cool. Like, everyone should think it's super cool. This is awesome. David says he's fist pumping from Australia. Gabriel says he's loves the fist pumps. Jacob says, wow, this guy's killing it. I think, Jacob, you need to spend more time watching Elliot's stuff, because it sounds like you're an engineer based on the chat. So Race 22 says, Elliot, your enthusiasm for aviation is inspiring, and I'm an aircraft mechanic and air race crew member.
Awesome.
Rock on. Cool, dude. Well, dude, I feel like we could talk for another like hour, and I don't know if our wives will allow that, because it sounds like both of us had rough childcare nights.
Yeah, I can hear them getting ready for the bath right now.
Oh, yeah, you can't miss bath time. All right, we got to cut it short. Dude, I would love to have you on another time just to keep talking about this stuff. I think, obviously, if you guys haven't, go check out Elliot's channel, subscribe, do all that stuff. You're going to learn a lot, and separately, you're going to have a lot of fun. And every once in a while, a guy yells at him from a truck, and it's like a great reality TV moment. So, all right, dudes. Elliot, thanks so much for being on.
Thank you. I really appreciate inviting me to be a part of this. This is a cool thing, and there should be more of it in aviation. I appreciate you taking the initiative to make it happen. So thank you.
Just thank COVID for putting me in my basement. All right, everyone, that's it for tonight. Thanks for everyone being in the chat. You guys are awesome, and I know there were a bunch of questions that we didn't get to, But obviously, you can always hit us up on Instagram or whatever. Happy to answer questions over there. At least I won't speak for Elliot, but for me, hit me up there. And next week, be sure to tune in. We're going to keep the experimental thing going. Charlie Becker from EAA is going to be on. He's like a home-built community guy. We'll get the official title from him when he's on the show. And I don't know, maybe he'll help me pick out what kind of airplane I should build after I somehow put 2 kids through college. All right. Have a good night, everyone. We'll see you next time.